Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we are starting a brand new Let's Talk Lore series covering Cao Cao's life from his birth in 155 to the eve of the Battle of Guan in the year 200. Now, this is a massive span of time for our typical lore series, given the fact that I like to provide as much detail as possible in these series. So in order to do that, this series will be broken down into 3 separate acts. Act 1 will cover Cao Cao's childhood and his early days into politics. The second act will follow Cao Cao's rise to power through the chaotic events such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion and the coalition against Dong Zhuo, before finally setting up for his pivotal conflict with Yuan Shao in the third and final act of this lore series. So, kicking off our first act here, we will start by taking a closer look at Cao Cao's family, and in particular, his family tree, as it has been the subject of many historical debates. Now, what is not up for debate is the fact that Cao Cao was born in the year 155 as the firstborn son to Cao Song in a place called Qiao or Qiao County. And in the game Total War 3 Kingdoms, this town would be around where Cao Cao starts out the game in the 190 start, near the borders of the capital of Chen Commandery and its livestock farm to the south. However, while his birthplace and birth years are not up for debate, we did only list his father here, as his birth mother is the subject of our very first debate. From historical documents, we know that Cao Song was married to Lady Ding, who was a member of the prominent Ding clan inside Qiao. And in fact, when Cao Pi ended up declaring himself emperor, he gave the title of empress to his late grandmother, Lady Ding. But I do have 2 solid reasons to believe that Lady Ding was actually not Cao Cao's birth mother. First, we have to understand that in ancient China, the family structure allowed for concubines in what's called 一夫一妻多妾 system. And this basically means you have one husband, one wife, and multiple concubines. And despite any negative connotations the word concubine might have in English, concubines were treated as members of the family, as they were basically wives who were married into the family late. Now, of course, social status-wise, they are definitely lower tier compared to the wife, but they were still members of the family. And Lady Ding here was clearly Cao Song's main and first wife. That is not disputable. But we also know that Cao Song had many concubines throughout his life, as he was quite wealthy, so he could afford them. But sadly, as often the case with women back in that time period, they were not recorded in history. We don't even have their family name, as in the case of Lady Ding. We know at least her clan name is Ding. But what we do know is that it is recorded when Cao Cao was born, Cao Song was already middle-aged. However, we do have to make note that in this time period, the term middle-aged means something very different from what it means now, as this probably implied you were in your late 20s. But even so, Lady Ding, being the first and main wife, would have married Cao Song when they were both teenagers. So assuming they had been trying for kids, which would have been the normal thing to do, Cao Cao's birth would have been a very late one, especially if you consider the fact that Cao Cao would eventually have 4 more younger brothers, with at least one of them confirmed to be from the same mother. So it is far more likely that Lady Ding did not have any kids, and that Cao Cao and his brothers were all from Cao Song's concubines, which would still make sense for Cao Pi to name the late Lady Ding the Empress, given the fact that kids of concubines also had to refer to the main wife as their mothers, as she was the woman of the house. Now, aside from this speculation based on Cao Song's age at the time of Cao Cao's birth, Cao Cao's first wife is also named Lady Ding, as she also comes from a branch of the same prominent Ding clan in Qiao. And she happens to be barren. So there could be definitely some genetics at work here. Then, if you throw in the fact that in one of Cao Cao's poems, he wrote that he lost his mother when he was young, and how he was neglected by his father, as we can see from line 3 and 4 here, 既无三途教, refers to the fact that he did not get a chance to learn from his mother, and 不闻过庭语 refers to the fact that he was not taught by his father. So it would seem to suggest that his birth mother could have been a concubine who died young, so he was raised with less attention from Cao Song and Lady Ding. Furthermore, the second reason, and the strongest evidence that I have against the fact that Lady Ding is Cao Cao's birth mother, is from the fact that Cao Cao's courteous name, given by his own father, also suggests that he was born by a concubine. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of courteous name or style name in Chinese culture, they are names given to you when you come of age, in most instances by your own father or sometimes by a teacher. It represents the name that you will use in public, as your birth name is something that is deemed private and only used among close family members. This custom has died out almost entirely by around the 1950s, with only certain Confucian schools still using this system today. But during the Han Dynasty, this was the cultural norm. So Cao Cao, whose courteous name, as you can see here, was Mengde, would have been known in his time as Cao Mengde or just Mengde. Now, this doesn't mean that no one outside of his family knew that his birth name was in fact Cao Cao, but it would have been rude or straight up disrespectful if you actually referred to him as such, unless you were a close member of his family. But why is Mengde a telling sign in this debate about Cao Cao's birth mother? Well, in our previous Sun Jian and Sun Ce lore series, we introduced the custom of using ranking characters in one's courteous name to reflect your place among siblings. For example, Sun Ce was the oldest son, so his courteous name was Bo Fu, while Sun Quan was the second oldest, so his name was Zhong Mou, where Bo within Bo Fu is a character used to represent the oldest, and Zhong within Zhong Mou was a character used to represent the second oldest. And of course, no one did this better than the Sima clan, as Sima Yi's father, Sima Fang, ended up having 8 sons, and all of them followed this ranking system to the letter, as they were called Bo Da, Zhong Da, Shu Da, Ji Da, and so forth. But you might be wondering now, what does any of this have to do with Cao Cao, who despite being a firstborn son, didn't get the Bo as the first character in his courteous name? Well, not following the ranking system was a totally normal thing, and many people didn't follow this, and Cao Cao's character of Meng would have been just a very normal random character used, except it's not. If we trace back to the Book of Rites, where it's recorded how to use these ranking system, there is a line that says, 嫡长曰伯，硕长曰孟. 嫡长 here means the oldest child from your main wife. 曰 means named, and 伯 is the character we've been seeing in Sun Ce's name and Sima Yi's brother's name. So the oldest child of the wife should be named 伯. 硕长曰孟. 硕长 means the oldest child of the concubine should be named Meng. So if we go back to Cao Cao's name, whose courteous name ends up being Mengde, we can see that Cao Cao is most likely the son of a concubine. But since he was the firstborn, and Lady Ding didn't have any other kids, he is entitled to just as much inheritance as would be a son of the main wife. Now, this is probably more evident if we look at the case of Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu, as Yuan Shao was the oldest son of his family, but he was born by a maid who would eventually become a concubine after giving birth to Yuan Shao, while Yuan Shu, being the younger brother, was the son of the main wife. So, in this case, Yuan Shu would have inheritance right to the family, and Yuan Shao would be someone that doesn't have much social standing in the family, even though he is the older brother. But luckily for Yuan Shao, his father's older brother, or his uncle, didn't have any sons. So Yuan Shao, as a concubine son, was deemed a spare. so he was given over to his uncle and adopted as his son. This made Yuan Shao the heir to his uncle's titles, and since his uncle is older than his father, Yuan Shao eventually, through this adoption, surpassed his younger brother Yuan Shu as the head of the clan, which was something that always bothered Yuan Shu, as he had grown up knowing that Yuan Shao was just the son of a maid and worthless compared to him. And perhaps it was because Yuan Shao and Cao Cao were both sons of concubines that they were able to bond and become friends in their schooling days in the capital. But that's a story for another episode. So, with the mystery of Cao Cao's mother solved, we can move on to our next debate, and that is the matter of Cao Cao's grandfather, which actually brings us back to the topic of adoption, as Cao Cao's own father, Cao Song, was adopted, since Cao Cao's grandfather, Cao Teng, was in fact a eunuch, thus unable to have his own children. So the debate here is really who was Cao Song before he was adopted by Cao Teng. And there were at least 3 very competitive competing theories on this, and I say war because the recent discovery of Cao Cao's tomb and the magic of DNA testing, we actually now know for certain which one of these theories is actually correct and factual. But it is still fun to go through some of the wrong ones just to see why they were popular theories in the first place. Now, the first incorrect theory is that Cao Song was a common beggar, an abandoned street child that Cao Teng had taken pity on and adopted as his own, and given him the name of Cao. Now, the source of this series was crafted by Yuan Shao's advisors as they wrote this rumor as part of their herald to the world before setting off to try to conquer Cao Cao at the Battle of Guan. So we can see pretty clearly that this one is just a false rumor created by Yuan Shao to delegitimize Cao Cao's position as the prime minister by suggesting that he was not only the adopted grandson of a lowly eunuch, but also the son of a common beggar. But in all honesty, there was no truth in this theory whatsoever, and this was often one of the weakest theory out there. Now, the second theory is probably the most commonly believed one, and one that I had personally thought was true until the results of the DNA test came to light. And the reason why I gave so much credit to this theory is because it came straight from the records of the Three Kingdoms, which is probably one of the better historical sources on the Three Kingdoms period, even though it has been proven time and time again to contain some faulty information. And inside the records, it states that Cao Song was originally from the Xiahou clan and was in fact Xiahou Dun's uncle. He was given over to Cao Teng by the Xiahou clan as a way to befriend the eunuch during the party incident, as the Xiahou clan were the gentry class and had aligned themselves with the scholars who had lost the conflict of the party incident to the eunuchs. So to prevent them from being punished, they gifted a son to a very powerful eunuch to be spared. Now, there were several factors contributing to how this theory gained popularity. One is the fact that this helps explain how Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan came to Cao Cao's aid very early on in his rise and stuck with him through the tough situations. And it also is hard to debate against the fact that it comes from a very reputable historical source in the records of Three Kingdoms. But there has always been this small flaw in this theory, and that is, if Cao Song had originally been a member of the Xiahou clan, then where did people like Cao Ren and Cao Hong, who were members of the Cao clan, come from? If Cao Teng, who is a eunuch who's unable to have children, and he only adopted Cao Song, then where did Cao Cao find all these relatives in Cao Ren and Cao Hong and Cao Chun and so forth? Well, the answer lies in the third theory, or perhaps it shouldn't even be called a theory anymore now that it has been confirmed through DNA testing. And the real story is that Cao Teng actually had older brothers, and one of them was named Cao Bao, who through Cao Teng's influence as a powerful eunuch in the court, eventually became the administrator of Yinchuan. And Cao Bao himself had 3 sons, and the oldest son was named Cao Chi, who eventually will be the father of Cao Ren and Cao Chun. The middle kid is named Cao Ying, and finally, the youngest son is named Cao Song. And Cao Song here, being the youngest, was deemed once again a spare and expendable, and given the fact that Cao Bao's younger brother Cao Teng, who helped him out gain the position, was a eunuch and unable to have children, he passed on Cao Song, his youngest son, over to his younger brother Cao Teng as his own adopted son. And that's why we have the explanation of how Cao Cao has Cao Ren and Cao Chun come help him, because they are his cousins, whether before the adoption of Cao Song or after the adoption. And if you're wondering, then how do we explain the fact that the Xiahou clan came to Cao Cao's aid? Well, that has to go back to the fact that Cao Cao's wife, Lady Ding, and her sister, also Lady Ding, married the Xiahou clan. So Xiahou clan married Cao Cao's wife's younger sister, namely Xiahou Yuan married Lady Ding. So they're in-laws. Cao Cao and Xiahou Yuan are in-laws. So that's why Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan came to Cao Cao's aid quite early on. As you can see, the Ding clan, the Cao clan, and the Xiahou clan were all prominent clans in Qiaoxian. And as we are on the topic of DNA tests, let me shed some more light on the actual process here, as it has to do a lot with our last debate, and that is the popular theory that Cao Cao is actually the descendant of Cao Can, who is the second prime minister of the Western Han dynasty. This theory was put forth by Cao Cao himself and also recorded in the records of Three Kingdoms. And much like how Liu Bei claims that he was related to the imperial bloodline, Cao Cao's attempt here was a mean to legitimize his position as the regent and prime minister by finding a linkage to a great prime minister in the past. But since both Cao Cao and Cao Can's tomb have all been discovered, the DNA test has confirmed that they are indeed not related. And from the tombs of Xiahou Dun, Cao Teng, Cao Song, we can test Cao Cao's DNA with all of them, and it has been discovered that, of course, his match closely with his father, Cao Song's, but also that of his grandfather, Cao Teng, which is why we can prove that Cao Song was adopted over from one of Cao Teng's brothers. Otherwise, Cao Cao would not match with Cao Teng very closely. And a test between Xiahou Dun's DNA and Cao Cao's DNA proved that they are not related. So that eliminates the theory that Cao Song was actually originally a member of the Xiahou clan. And all this talk about tombs does bring me back to a off-topic discussion about tourism, as that has come up quite a few times in many of our discussions. And we can talk in particular about the town of Qiaoxian, which is now known as Bozhou. And it is located in today's Anhui province. And it is a decent tourist destination if you're particularly interested in Three Kingdom historical tours, as there are many famous people that comes from this small area, namely the Cao clan, the Xiahou clan. And if we look at what's there today, there is Cao Teng's tomb, there is Cao Song's tomb, there is a military transport tunnel used by Cao Cao, and shockingly, Hua Tuo's temple. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Hua Tuo, he is a famous doctor during the Three Kingdoms period, and he was born in the same town Cao Cao was born in 10 years prior. And their fate would cross once again when Cao Cao suffered from a brain tumor late in his life. And at least according to the Romance of Three Kingdoms version, Hua Tuo suggested using surgery to remove the tumor, which made Cao Cao feel like Hua Tuo was going to take his life by opening up his head, and he sentenced Hua Tuo to death. And Cao Cao eventually would die from complications from such a tumor very soon after. So it is quite interesting that these two legendary characters from this time period would actually share the same hometown, and if you go there today, Hua Tuo has a temple there in his honor. So this definitely makes for a pretty interesting visit. And with that sidetrack done, we're also going to be wrapping up this episode. And in our next episode, we'll be mainly focused on some more well-known stories from Cao Cao's youth and childhood and explore how all of these experiences made him into the man that he will become. So until next time, Bye!